students of economics, welcome back to yet another teaching module. Let me just go through what we have covered so far. We learned about what is statistics, what are its functions, and the importance of statistics. Thereafter, we went on to learn about the various methods of collecting primary data. That is the direct personal interview, the telephonic method of collecting data, and the mailed questionnaire. Today, let's move on and complete this topic, collection of data. In this particular lesson, we will learn about the census survey method, the sample survey method. We will also learn about the types of sampling, that is random and non-random sampling. So also we will learn about the merits or the advantages and demerits or disadvantages of both the census and sample survey methods. So let's begin. Well, there are two ways of collecting data where area is concerned. One is the census survey method and the other is the sample method or sample survey method. Now, what is the census survey? Well, in this method, each and every element of the population are considered for study. That means you're leaving no one out of the scope of your study, whatever it is that you are trying to study. Now, in the Census of India, which is a very good example of the exercise of collecting data by means of a census survey. In Census of India, demographic data on birth and death rates, illiteracy, unemployment, life expectancy are collected. And this method considers each and every element of the data. You can see in the picture, there are people, enumerators, investigators sent by the Central Statistical Organization, and they are collecting data on behalf of the Census of India. Now that we've defined what is a census survey, let us study its advantages and disadvantages. The first advantage, the result that is drawn by means of a census survey will be absolutely correct, accurate, and reliable. There is a high degree of accuracy and reliability. Each and every unit of the population is studied so that nothing is left out from the inquiry. So thus, the result is more reliable. As you saw in the previous slide in the picture, there is face-to-face contact. There's a direct personal interview going on with census forms. So we can consider that this data is reliable because we are meeting the people themselves personally. It is difficult to get detailed information in this method, but different characteristics can be easily studied on account of the outreach. Now let's move on to the disadvantages. This method is definitely not suitable where the area of investigation is wide. It consumes a lot of energy as well as it's an expensive exercise. It is definitely a time-consuming method because you're not leaving anyone out from the scope of your study. The possibility of personal biasedness exists. What is biasedness? When you are displaying favoritism towards a particular race, people of a particular religion or caste, then there is this problem of biasedness, of favoritism. And the responses of the respondents can be easily influenced thereby. This exercise requires special skills and training. You can't just go out and conduct an activity like a census survey. You have to be well equipped, trained for the job. Every country needs basic information on its residents. Why? For the purpose of planning, development, and improvement of the residents' quality of life. The census is the basis for reviewing the country's progress in the past decade, monitoring the ongoing schemes of the government, and thereby plan for the future. The census provides detailed and authentic information on demography. What we mean by demography? Everything, all the characteristics of the population. Economic activity, literacy and education, housing and household amenities, facilities, urbanization, fertility and mortality, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, languages, religion, migration, disabilities, if any, and many other social, cultural, and demographic data. As we said earlier, the census data is taken by visiting each and every household and gathering particulars by asking questions and filling up census forms. So here we have a mind map which reflects the various terms that are related to the word census. So what are we doing in a census? We're collecting data. We might be doing a study of businesses. We study the economy. We may study factors or variables like income, marital status, population, origin of people, poverty, geography, social security, education, housing, transportation, Medicare, deaths, the races that exist in a particular country, health, and so on. So there are so many variables that can be studied with the help of a census survey method. It is worth mentioning here that the Census of India that was last conducted was in the year 2011. It was a paper census. Various census forms were given to the investigators and they had to help fill up the forms with the responses given by the respondents. Now the next Census of India is in the year 2021. This will be the 16th Census of India. It is envisaged to have a digital census in the coming year. And let me tell you that the Census of India is conducted every 10 years. Moving on to study the other type of survey which is conducted area-wise, and that is the sample survey. What is a sample survey? It is a subset of the population where the entire population is not considered for study. Rather, a sample is collected from the group, and this sample is a representative of the entire group. You can see here in the diagram, a sample is drawn from the population, and this sample is representative of the entire group or the population of our study or our scope of study. Now moving on to study the advantages and the disadvantages of the sample survey. The first merit. This simple method of investigation is economical. Why? Because only some units of the population are studied. So you can save money here. The process of investigation is not time consuming. Why? Because you're studying only a small part or group of the entire population. So you can save on time. This method is more feasible or possible in situations of large investigation. So, you overcome the difficulty of covering a large geographical area by drawing out a sample. There is administrative convenience in handling a limited number of items or data. Rather than, when you compare it with the census survey, you're handling a lot of data there. But here in a sample survey, for administrative purposes, it becomes much convenient. Let's study the disadvantages. The first one, it is only a partial investigation of the universe or population. The word universe is used synonymously with the word population. The second demerit, it is not very easy to collect and select a sample which would essentially represent the characteristics of the entire population. So we have to be very careful when drawing a sample. Sometimes the universe or the population may be so diverse that it becomes difficult to frame a sample. For example, maybe in a particular area where you're studying a particular village or a city or town, there are people from various other places. They have come and settled there. So you can't really get a sample if you are studying those people who are the original inhabitants of that village or city. Doing sampling involves a set of technical procedures. So you have to be trained in statistics. A typical example of an organization collecting a sample survey would be the National Sample Survey Organization. I like to give this example because you can understand that what you're studying is something that is practical and ongoing. What are the areas covered by NSSO surveys? Well, they cover or they study consumer expenditure, they can study household wealth, finance, employment, unemployment, and migration. They can study health and hygiene. They do study the educational sector and all its variables and characteristics. They study unorganized economic enterprises, land holdings, agricultural surveys can be conducted, livestock holdings and other agrarian issues. Other issues studied by the NSSO are travel by Indian households, village facilities in India, culture, prices, and so on. We will also study the types of sampling. In your syllabus, you just have to cover random sampling and non-random sampling. Here are some of the ways random sampling happens or comes about or goes about. One is simple random sampling, stratified random sampling, cluster random sampling. Under non-random sampling, you have quota, accidental, judgmental, snowball. And then you have yet another method of sampling, which is a mixed sampling, where you use both methods together. But what you have in your syllabus is just we need to study what is random sampling and what is non-random sampling. So here we go. What is random sampling? It is a method where the individual units from the population are selected at random. Under this method, every unit of the population has an equal chance of being selected. Now, a typical example of how a random sample is drawn is use of a random number table. If you go to the last pages of your statistics for economics textbook, you will find there random number tables, with the help of which you can draw a random sample. You can also use a lottery method. Well, you see here, suppose I have lotteries and I've numbered my data or each unit of my population from 1 to 12, and I put lots from 1 to 12, and I just pick up at random number 2, number 5, number 8, number 11. Now, the number 2 represents this particular individual, number 5 represents another individual, number 8 represents another man, and number 11, which is drawn, is representing another person. So here I have drawn a random sample. Everyone has an equal chance of being selected, so selection is by chance. Here are examples of random sampling. Here is simple random sampling. As I told you earlier, by chance I choose 3 people out of my scope of my study or my population or universe. Here in a stratified sampling, there are 2 groups or stratas made and samples are drawn from each group. In systematic sampling, I take a sample, I say every third person after my first unit that I have chosen will be a part of my sample. So I chose the second unit first, the third one is the 5th person, the third after the 5th is the 8th person, the third after the 8th is the 11th person. So here I am conducting a sample or drawing a sample in a systematic manner. Then you have the cluster sampling. I divide this entire population, as you can see here, it is divided into clusters, and I choose any one cluster, and that becomes my sample. It's good for you to know. And here we are with non-random sampling. What is non-random sampling? It is a method in which all the units of the population do not have an equal chance of being selected. And the convenience or judgment of the investigator plays an important role in the selection of samples. So all of these people don't have an equal chance of being selected. So there is some level of biasedness, or rather the sample is drawn for convenience purpose, out of convenience. I know for a fact that I'm not going to go in randomly choosing people. I'm going to be very selective about who I choose and make a part of my sample. For example, an investigator gets a sample from his friend circle. or from those households which are living close by. So there you are. The non-random sampling is also called a convenience sampling. Now here are some sources of collecting secondary data. International organizations like WHO, that is the World Health Organization, IMF, that is the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and reports published by them is a source of secondary data. Government sources like RBI Bulletin, NSSO, that is National Sample Survey Organization report, and reports of CSO, that is Central Statistical Organization, is also a source of secondary data. Private and semi-government sources like NCERT, that is National Council for Educational Research and Training, and UGC, that is University Grants Commission, their reports are also sources of secondary data. And we also have unpublished sources of various research universities, research conducted by them. They present papers and these are recorded in the universities. So these are good sources of secondary data. What I want you to do after watching the video is to compare and differentiate. I'd like you to prepare two answers. One, differentiate between the census survey and sample survey method. Second, differentiate between random sampling and non-random sampling. You have to do these exercises soon after watching the video. Today we have learned about the census survey method, the sample survey method, types of sampling, that is random and non-random sampling, as well as we looked at the merits and demerits of the census and sample method. We also looked at various sources of data collection. As always, I like to end with a quote by some personality, and here it is. It is proved by surveys that happiness does not come from love, wealth or power, but the pursuit of attainable goals. And another one follows. This quote is by Rob Lowe. He is an actor, producer, director. He says, sampling, statisticians have told us, is a much more effective way of getting a good census. So with this, I end this particular teaching lesson. Thank you so much for giving me a listening ear.